afternoon, good night, whatever time it may be. Glad you're back. Glad you're here. This is Pauline Theology's Daily Devo. I'm Paul, and we're going through the book of Judges. And so, what we talk about on this episode, or on these episodes, is trying to kind of read Scripture. How can we read Scripture? How can we study Scripture in a daily devotional? These are short, probably about 10 minutes at the most, and I want to be able to help you understand as you go through Scripture yourself, so that way you can ask these questions. The 3 questions we ask, or 4 questions actually, every time is, what is it even saying? What's the Bible even saying? What are we talking about when we read these stories? Because right now we're reading a story. What took place? What happened? Then after that, we see, in light of what happened, what can we see about God? What can we know about his character? And then next we ask, what does it display or tell us about ourselves? And then finally, in light of those 2 things, then how can we apply it to our lives? So let's go ahead and jump into it. We're in Judges chapter 1, verse 16. It says, "And the descendants of Kenite, Moses' father-in-law, went up with the people of Judah from the city of palms to the wilderness of Judah, which lies in the Negev near Arid. And they went and settled with the people. And Judah went with Simon his brother, and they defeated the Canaanites who inhabited Zephath and devoted it to destruction. So the name of the city was called Hormah. Judah also captured Gaza with its territory, and Ashkelon with its territory, and Ekron with its territory. And the Lord was with Judah, and he took possession of the hill country. But he could not drive out the inhabitants of the plain, because they had chariots of iron. And Hebron was given to Caleb, as Moses had said, and he drove out from it the 3 sons of Anak. But the people of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites who lived in Jerusalem. So the Jebusites have lived with the people of Benjamin in Jerusalem to this day. The house of Joseph also went up against Bethel, and the Lord was with them. And the house of Joseph scouted out Bethel. Now the name of the city was formerly Luz. And the spies saw a man coming out of the city, and they said to him, "Please show us the way into the city, and we will deal kindly with you." And he showed them the way into the city, and they struck the city with the edge of the sword. But they let the man and all his family go. And the man went to the land of Hittites and built a city and called its name Luz. That is the name of this city today. Or that is the name to this day. So what's going on? What's happening? Well, we've got a people that migrate. The descendants of Kenite, Moses' father-in-law, they all migrated to the wilderness. And Judah went with them. And when they went with them, they went actually, I guess, to hook up with Simon to defeat to wage war against the Canaanites in Zephath. And it says they devoted to destruction. We talked about devoted to the destruction in the last episode. So if you want to know a little bit more about that and why they do that, then check that episode out for sure. And it says, and so the name of the city was called Hormah. And that's actually, that's the name of the city is called devoted to the destruction, Haram. Yeah, it's kind of weird that way. And so it says after that, Judah captured a bunch of places, man. They captured a whole bunch. But they couldn't capture one area. It said the Lord was with them, but they couldn't capture one area. And then after that, it says that Caleb got his place that Moses had promised him, or Moses had said that he would. And then the Benjamites couldn't drive out their inhabitants. They couldn't drive out the Jebusites. And so they have been living with the Jebusites to this day. It says that Joseph, the Lord was with them, and they took over a bunch of areas. But the way they took over it probably wasn't the best way to be doing things, because they spied out the city, talked to a guy, and the guy was like, "Yeah, I'll let you in the city as long as you deal kind with me. You know, I'll show you how to get to the city, the gate, the way to sneak in, take over the place, as long as you deal kindly with me." And so they did that. They honored their word. They dealt kindly with them, and they put everybody else in the city. They struck them down, but not that family. And then that family left and started another city. So what's actually going on? Well, I think I just went over what's going on. I'm sorry. But what can we find out about God in this situation? I think it's important to recognize, though, is that the thing that the people of the house of Joseph did was not in accordance to what God had called them to do. They're not following God's will. You see, because like we talked about how they were supposed to be devoting these people to destruction, but they're letting people go free, which is not what God had called them to do. And so we actually get a kind of a twist here. If think about if you was a Jewish boy reading this after you read Joshua, you're like, man, they conquering, they doing all these things, and then now you're seeing they're not conquering anymore. We got our first time here where it says even Joseph, I'm sorry, not even Joseph, but even Judah, the one who is supposed to be the leader, the new captain, is not getting all the land that they were supposed to get. And then now we see even more Benjamites, they couldn't get their land. And then why is this happening? Like, what is this happening for? And I think it's because of what we saw earlier with Basic. Even though God was with them, they weren't. Though even though God was with them, He was merciful. So that's the first question we usually ask is well, what's a characteristic about God in this story? Is we see that God is merciful. See, even though they weren't doing what He had asked them to do, He was still with them so they can conquer the land. Though He did not allow them to take full possession of that, but He was merciful. And well, what do we see about man ourselves in this? And I think we see that we want to do our own thing. We aren't trusting of God as much as we need to be. That's been my big thing here lately, man. I just want others to trust God. I want to trust God more. I want to rely upon Him and know that He is good. But I think that the people here aren't doing that. They're not trusting God the way that they should, because if they were, they would know that the land that they had been promised was given to them, not by their own strength, their own might, their own force, but by God Himself. He was going to deliver the people into their hands. But because they didn't trust in that, they devised their own schemes in order to gain access into the land so they might win this war. And because of that, the others suffer. So I think that's one thing we can see about man here is that we are untrusting of God. We need to put our trust a little bit more in Him, a little bit more in Him. And I skipped actually a good one about God too, is that He is faithful. So He's merciful, but He is faithful. We see it says that Hebron was given to Caleb, as Moses had said. It's like God speaking through Moses had said that He was going to give this land to Caleb. And though time may have passed, all this time may have passed, I don't know how long, but I'm sure Caleb was kind of getting weary. He's like, man, where my land at and all that stuff. But God came through on His promise because He is faithful. What can we apply to our lives from all of this? What can we know? Well, I think we can trust in God. I think that's one of the biggest things that we should remember, because see, the writer here, he gives it a backhand slap, like I think people say a backhanded compliment, but I don't know if that applies here, but it's like a sneaky way of presenting the idea of trust. Because what happens is it says that Caleb got the land he was promised. So God is faithful. But then after that, it says that Joseph went and talk to a man about trying to gain the city. It's because Joseph, the tribe of Joseph, doesn't think God is faithful. You see, it shows the character of God, His faithfulness. Well, then in 1 second, how man doesn't believe in that faithfulness. So I think an application for us today is to first recognize that God is faithful. Look at the scriptures and see how He has told the truth of Himself, and how He does good and lives good and is good and seeks good for us continually. But then trust in that. Let us trust in that. Man, I hope you learned something today, and let me walk myself into trust even more today than I did yesterday. And may you as well. I'll see you guys in the next episode.